People are still joining, so we are going to wait another minute to start. Thank you. I think we can start now, Stefan.
Okay, so good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everybody. My name is Stefan Kaiser. I'm your host of today's webinar, where we want to give you a quick outlook to our latest research and our latest insights that we are going to work on. And we have a fantastic lineup of speakers today. So before we go into the sessions that we have planned today, allow me to give you a quick update also on our own research roadmap that we are planning to fulfill until the end of the year. And they are more or less resonating with most of the topics that you are also faced with in your day-to-day as a vendor company. So next slide, please. I just brought an overview of the open projects on research projects we are working on until the end of the year, based on our 3 formats that you probably know. If you don't know, we are happy to explain further in detail. On the one hand is the radar, which is one big, let's say, vendor assessment tool in our visibility section of services and offerings. There we have in Q3 an interesting lineup of 2 radars. One is already released. It's on open digital platforms with a lot of insights on all the IoT related topics that we see in the market. And what we are currently working on is on AWS related services within the radar supplier assessment. Then you may know about the vendor landscapes, which is a good format of presenting a broader landscape of vendors, especially interesting also for the smaller and mid-sized vendors in today's webinar, where we try to make the angle much broader when it comes to a certain topic, and especially the specialists can get much higher visibility here. So we are planning something on CSR right now. We are working on cloud consulting and system integration, and who are the vendors in this landscape. And as you can see in Q4, and also with a quick outlook on next year, the topics that we are planning here. And last not least, on the CXO side, where we do this end user based research with a lot of interviews across your clients. Right now in Q3, we are working on understanding digital customer engagement strategies, and we will hear also something from Spencer today on that. And we are working on a CXO survey with a lot of data deep dives on SAP and S/4HANA modernization and migration. And next slide, please. That's the last part of our own roadmap, and then I will hand over just to give you an outlook on what we already have published on open digital platforms. You can see there are 9 different topics where we have assessed the vendor landscape, and this might be and should be interesting in many dimensions of your own thinking in this regard, what we have related to IoT and all the topics you can see here. And as I said, we are currently working on a deep dive and a vendor assessment of AWS related services across Europe. So everyone who already has received the participation documents is in the process, and we plan to publish the ongoing research on this one by 11th of September. So a lot of things to do, hopefully a lot of topics where you also can see a big momentum. And now please give a warm welcome to our fantastic lineup of today. So next slide, please. Our three analysts of today are Christophe. I think everyone will know Christophe, who is our chief analyst and who will bring some context about the key updates on IT services and software, primarily based on our new data scenarios in terms of growth expectations by geographies. I think it's really interesting to see that there are still massive differences between different regions and countries in terms of growth expectations. And then I'm happy to have Spence on board today, who is giving us some insights on digital customer engagements and the latest trends. So he has called his presentation Blending Experiences. And last but not least, I'm happy to have Joachim with us today, who is talking about the key findings that we have just published or we are about to publish on the latest CXO survey on SAP S/4HANA migration and modernization business. So have fun, and yes, I hand over to Christophe. Let's go.
Thank you, Stefan. Christian, next slide, please. So Christophe Châlons, I'm a chief analyst at PAC. My role is to make sure that we develop a consistent scenario and analysis across the geographies, the industries, the product and services, the topics, and other offerings, both with the PAC analysts and also with our partners in Europe, in Americas, in APAC, both for our city program and for our custom projects. My aim today is to provide a view on the current situation on the IT market, and as usual, with a strong focus on IT services. So how does the market look like? In many countries, we talk right now about the risk of an upcoming recession. In some countries, we have it already. So how does the IT market perform? So on this slide, what I did is to compare the growth of the IT services market. I took the IT services market excluding BPO and infrastructure support. So infrastructure support is really the low end of the market. BPO is really very specific. So I focus on the core of the IT services market in 16 countries. Which are the largest countries in Western Europe, North America with USA and Canada, and Japan, which is by far the biggest market in APAC. Altogether, these 16 countries represent 80% of the global IT services market. So approximately in this scope, IT services excluding BPO and infrastructure support, we are talking here about 540 billion euro out of the global market of 680 billion euro. First of all, when we look at this slide, you see here the growth from 21 to 22, and here you see the growth 22-23. You see that clearly there is a major slowdown of growth impacting most geographies. The most massive slowdown, I mean, you could think, okay, if growth was the same, you would be around the middle of this picture. So if you are strongly below, like the US, it shows that there is a strong slowdown. And here, between 23 with 8+% growth, and sorry, in 22 and in 23, we only have 2.5%, a bit less than this. So massive slowdown in the US, which is by far the biggest market. It represents 40% of the worldwide market and more than 50% of all the 16 countries we see here. And as usual, it is the most reactive geography, the market with the highest peaks, but also the deepest troughs, with growth contracting very substantially this year. The contrary, we have some markets much more resilient. Take Austria, but caution, one single mega deal generates nearly 2% growth in 22 and 23 in this country, but some other countries like Spain, Norway, Belgium, France appear as more resilient. However, if we consider that these figures take also into account an average price increase of 3 to 4% in 22 and nearly as much in 23. It means that we have approximately 4% growth in 22 in volume, and the market in volume is more or less flat in 23. If we were looking at another market, focusing on consulting and system integration, so part of the IT services market, CNSI, then we would have even stronger discrepancies between 22 and 23. Take the US growing 11.5% in 22 and only 2.5% in 23. Germany, a similar pace in 22, growing approximately 5% in 23. The UK was above 10% in 22, around 5% in 23. France, 9.5% in 22, Norway 9%, Spain 8.5%. And for these three countries, we expect 5.5 to 6% growth in 23. So massive slowdown of growth, but as we will see, differentiated opportunities in different segments. Before we move to the segments, how does the overall situation in 23 differ from the ones that we had in the last 2 years? The last 2 years, first of all, they were simply exceptional. 21 was a strong catch-up after the pandemic contraction. 22 was a massive acceleration in volume and in prices. And unlike 21 and 22, we see now there is no longer a general dynamic which boosted virtually all customers, all verticals, all segments, topics, and services, but a much more selective attitude by accounts and by topics, and within each account we will see that also by topic. Second, we have, and this is usual in such an economic environment, we have a focus on much more concrete, most often short-term return on investment, on raising efficiency, productivity, automation, agility, and resiliency. We have, by comparison with the last 2 years, right now, a lack of large deals, large projects, still quite a few medium-sized deals around cloud transformation, around software migration like S4, enterprise-wide data and analytics and AI. We have still many numerous, many small projects, but we have also some larger deals expected in the next quarters. We see decision-making cycle getting much longer, even in public sector. The scope of the projects, future projects, but also existing projects are getting questioned. Sometimes they get reduced. The project timelines are extended, the deadline are postponed. We see clearly that while strategic issues remain maintained, the nice-to-have projects get postponed. This means together that most accounts maintain some investment in strategic areas while they are making cost saving in where they can. We also have an overall slowdown in consulting, to a lesser extent also in SI, and at the same time, a slight acceleration in managed services type deals, so application management, managed public and hybrid cloud services especially. We see price negotiation very tense, much more than the last 2 years. The average prices continue to rise, yet the negotiations are much harder than last year. We see that suppliers seen as strategic within a customer are holding their own, while others are suffering. And finally, we see that both suppliers and customers are much more cautious about recruiting people. And this aspect, by the way, has a positive short-term effect on subcontracting or outsourcing, as your customers, if they don't hire enough resources, they will need you to manage or to run the project. Which market do we see developing positively, maintaining growth pace, or even accelerating? So what are the topics behind these growth rates we see here? First, when we look at the 3 pillars of the digital transformation, let's start with digital customer engagement. Spencer will address it later. We see a substantial slowdown there. So this is the market around marketing, commerce, multi-channel, customer experience. And this was the market the most positively impacted by the pandemic and also by the subsequent recovery. So slowdown there. Nevertheless, we still see 2-digit growth around Salesforce or Adobe in most geographies. So slowdown, but still a good market. In the OT world, so technical IT, we see only limited slowdown of the massive transformation impacting both the shop floor and SCADA processors on the one hand, so what we call smart processors, and also on the trend towards software-defined products and product as a service. Think about the car industry, for example, with still very strong investment in car software, in autonomous driving, or driver assistance, in multimodal mobility, battery mega factories. So still in this market, for sure, some cost saving like everywhere, but still a good development there. Finally, when we look at the back office transformation, we see substantial attempts to save costs, to delay some projects, to postpone some deadlines. But at the same time, we see a strong wave of ERP transformation, boosted mainly by SAP in Europe or in Japan with the RISE program, boosted by SAP, Oracle, Workday in the US, and selected countries like the UK. Below the 3 pillars, when we look at the key enablers of the digital transformation, first of all, let's have a look at the cloud transformation. So cloud has been the main growth driver over the last 5 years and the main enabler of the digital transformation. And this was illustrated by the incredible growth of pure play vendors like AWS, Google, Salesforce, ServiceNow, and also by the impressive rebound of Microsoft. The latest results of AWS may be seen as alarming. So we saw growth of AWS in Q1 falling to 16%, which is substantial. But for the first time since AWS reports revenue, revenue decreased compared with the previous quarter. So revenue decreasing sequentially. And we had a similar development for Salesforce, so growth down to 11%, 13% in constant currency. Here also, for the first time since Salesforce reports, we saw revenue decreasing sequentially. But here we see clearly a difference between North America and Europe, shown by Salesforce, with 10% growth in North America and 17% in Europe. So big gap. And we see 2 reasons for this. First of all, the cloud transformation is much more advanced in North America than in Europe. But also we have a very tense situation of tech giants like Meta, Netflix, Twitter, which grew like crazy in 21 and 22, spent a lot on IT, a lot on cloud, and suddenly they decided for massive cost savings. So the cloud market is still significantly growing in 23. But if we look, for example, at the consulting, SI, managed services, or the related services, we see growth contracting from 30 to 30% last year to 15 to 25% this year. What is clear is that even in Europe, the low-hanging fruits have been migrated to the cloud. So now the growth will come from more strategic workloads, from rise in data volumes, for example, linked with analytics and AI, with data coming from smart products. The second lesson for me is that the massive price increase made by the hyperscalers in 22, even if they are justified by currency fluctuation, by inflation, or by higher energy costs, have led many customers to rethink the public cloud only strategy, to make it rather public cloud first, yet hybrid cloud approach. The second pillar that we see in the digital transformation is analytics and AI. And here, contrarily to the cloud, we see a noticeable acceleration in 23, boosted by the buzz around generative AI. However, in generative AI, we see mainly consulting projects, smaller implementations, as companies are mainly analyzing the potential of AI and generative AI in particular, and setting the foundation for upcoming investments with data infrastructure platform, with governance, and so on. Finally, if we look at the remaining growth areas, there is no slowdown at all in cyber, and we see sustainability projects becoming more sizable, compliance being the major reason, but we also see companies aiming at reducing energy consumption to save costs. Finally, which industries are doing better or worse in this, the current period? First of all, there are strong discrepancies between the countries, and you can see that in your city data. If we look at the US market, we see the strongest slowdown in the e-business industry, so the GAFAs and other e-business players, also in telecom, in media, in banking, high tech, and retail, while public sector and utilities have remained quite resilient. In most European countries, we also see banking, retail, and CPG under pressure, while public sector, mainly federal government, defense, often also healthcare, utilities, insurance have remained quite dynamic. We see public sector and airlines have remained quite positive. Logistics still doing well, now spending the huge profits accumulated over the last 2 years. While the situation in manufacturing depends on the segments. So for example, automotive is quite resilient so far, at least the OEMs. Aerospace and defense, life science are doing quite well, while consumer products, they are victims of the inflation and subsequent frugal customer attitude. And energy-intensive industries like heavy chemistry or metallurgy are suffering. We will publish our scenarios by country in the coming 2 weeks, starting already today, and also showing there the scenario by industry. Thank you for your attention, and now I hand over to my colleague Spencer.
Thank you very much, Christophe. Hello, everybody. My name is Spencer Izard. I'm a research director here at PAC. I'm the lead of our cluster of digital customer experience and engagement research. And what I look to talk to you about today is what we see in this market across Europe with regards to how enterprises across a range of sectors are focusing on blending experiences from different forms within their organization. If I can just move to the next slide, please. So this is a very busy slide. Unfortunately, I don't have the full time today to go through all of this in great detail. What I would say is if a conversation around this is of interest to you, please do reach out to myself or anybody else on this call or part of the account management team, because I can break down all elements of this slide into much more granular detail if needed to support the conversation. The reason why I'm putting this slide up though is to focus on the orange part on the top left, transform customer experience. I want to highlight that to transform customer experience, all enterprises I speak with are going through one or more of all these other elements of activity at the same time, I think, as we would often expect. But there's also an important reliance on these other activities to make transforming customer experience and other forms of experience a success. This cannot be driven successfully without being able to exploit business information, as seen on this slide, or building the modern workplace and giving employees and agents and other people within the business better experiences that support engagements indirectly and indirectly. So I just wanted to highlight that what we're talking about today is incredibly important, is a big focus for many enterprises, but is part of a much wider tapestry of activity that there's an interreliance on. If I can move to the next slide, please. So let's just focus for a second on talking about what we see at PAC as the blending of experiences. So we tend to talk to enterprise organizations, to technology companies, service providers in this these 4 X's type manner. So at the top here, you can see obviously the one most of us know is customer experience in orange there. In the bottom, the EX is employee experience. In the context of this presentation, employee experience are desk-based types of roles, typically in the head office of organizations. So in the context of digital customer engagement, that would be marketing departments, other forms of creative departments, customer service, customer analysis departments, things like that. On the left side of here, you can see AX, which is agent experience, which is focused on the roles of those in contact centers. We've seen very clearly, I don't think it's too bold for me to say that I think a lot of organizations underestimated the criticality of contact centers prior to the pandemic. I think often they were seen as an important part of their business, but not something so as integral as part of the whole customer journey because of its sort of post-transaction or post-engagement nature. But for a lot of organizations, the pandemic made them realize that contact centers are as much the front face of their business as any other part of customer experience. So there's been a lot of work in recent years around agent experience and what that means. If I just talk for a second about the blue circle, FX. So FX is field experience. So what we at PAC mean by that is that any role that, for example, if you're a retailer, you're working in the store as a store staff member, that's a field type role. So somebody that's not in a head office, is in front of customers. That can also be including people who work in manufacturing facilities, distribution facilities, in government who work directly engaging with citizens in sort of that government to citizen type services that you can have as well. and that all of these together are what's the blending is the challenge that organizations are going through. They've spent the last decade focusing a lot on digital experiences around CX, and now need to form all these other types of experiences together to be more holistic. If we can just one click, please. Thank you. Actually, I tell you what, do 2 more clicks, please. There you go, thank you. Just put it all on the slide, and then that's easier for me to talk around as well then. Oh, sorry, can we go back one? Thank you. So obviously a presentation in 2023 wouldn't be complete without mentioning generative AI. I don't want to be come across as trying to be too sort of cheeky when I talk about this, but we are seeing a lot at the moment of, the answer is generative AI. What is the question you have? What I would say is that's a lot of very good enthusiasm by software companies and services companies, and it's a good conversation to drive and have. A lot of the enterprises that I'm speaking with around digital customer engagement, they're focusing initially around generative AI around the CX side of things, because of course there's quite a lot of growth in conversation around the use of them for chatbots and other customer analytics type services, and understanding bigger patterns of information out, bigger patterns of data. We're starting to see proof of concepts investigations around using Gen AI, for example, around the CX space to create tailored loyalty plans, for customers, or whether that is high street customers or whether that's B2B business clients and customers as well. So there's a lot of sort of focus and conversation around there. If I pick field experience over there, the most conversation activity is, how do we unify almost, in that omni-channelish kind of language kind of way, but how do we unify field, store and agent experience, the AX side as well, closer together, because these experiences are the ones having the most contact with customers on a day-to-day basis, and having a consistency of information across all of these experiences for all of these different types of people within an organization is integral to offering faster, better services and better responses. On the agent experience side of things, it's continued call center automation. So not generative AI, but use of AI in general to further compress timescales and automate complexity within in call centers is a major push. Again, as I mentioned, the pandemic showed that there was a complexity of operational dynamics that really need to be adjusted for most organizations. And we're seeing a bigger trend in an area called live engagement. So that's basically the ability for an agent to have the ability, when directly speaking live with a customer, a client, or a citizen, to be able to solve their problem there and then by having access to all the other departments and services that they need in that moment in time, without without moving people around different functions within the organization's contact center experience. And then lastly, at the bottom for employee experience, the biggest area of focus is frankly reducing complexity around the creative cycle around content delivery supply chain. So, marketing cycles are getting far more aggressive, far more compressed. The demand to actually engage in much more sort of micro level adjustments, much more focused, not just personalized, but also on segments of people and demographics. Generative AI will have a big role both in the creation of materials for that, but also the sort of strategic advisory side of things. So we're seeing, in all honesty, all of these elements need to be blended together to offer that overall customer experience, and historically they just haven't been. So this is part of the journey we're seeing this year, and I would imagine into next. If we can go to the next slide. Thank you. So what I wanted to highlight, having talked about two sort of other dimensions finally, is some of the common workflows in enterprises, in the departments and the areas of the business that deal with digital customer engagement. So where are these organizations really focusing their investments at the moment to up their capability as a business? We've already talked a little bit, if you look at the middle one in the center there, employee, field and agent experience strategies. So those workflows around that, a lot of businesses I speak to are looking for sort of help and assistance from service providers and others to sort of help come in and give experiences of what's happening in other industries. So for example, I'm seeing a lot of push around public sector to want to engage with service providers to help them better learn what's been going in B2B and B2C in both, say, for example, in manufacturing and in retail sectors, and how they can improve in these type of take lessons from them and improve in those type of areas. I'm starting to see an increase in conversation for organizations to have either design ops capabilities or design centers of excellence. Now, design ops it's a framework that is, it is playing on the ops, moniker that's grown out of DevOps, SecOps, FinOps, and all these other MLOps and all these other ops. But it's there because I think the creative and design parts of businesses have seen the success on the coding and the development side of DevOps for getting product and getting services out quicker, and realize that they could actually do a better job in compressing some of the complexities of their creative design processes. And this is another important function that service providers can play as a partner in helping to build this capability out and helping to iron out some of the complexities in businesses. And just lastly, I'll just highlight, then we are seeing still a little bit of early days work in the product, service, and immersive experience design area. There's still conversations happening around augmented reality and virtual reality and what that actually means for most businesses in this sort of space, and it means something slightly different by industries. But with that, I think that was the equivalent to the Oscars playing your music to get you off the stage. I think that was a very good time to hand over to my colleague Joachim to talk about his section. Thank you very much, everybody.
Yeah, hello everybody. My name is Joachim Hackmann. I'm business lead of practice lead of the business applications services and software and services practice at PAC, and where we cover all the research and the analysis around the business applications such as SAP, Salesforce, Oracle, and Microsoft Dynamics and others. What I'm going to do in the next couple of minutes, next slide, please, Christian. What I'm going to do in the next couple of minutes is to give you a small introduction in our latest research, in our latest CXO service on the status quo of SAP and S/4HANA migration in European companies. This survey is part of our CXO series, which we have launched a couple of years ago to analyze specific current topics and themes in detail and explore investment decisions in European companies. As always, we have surveyed more than 500 European decision makers in this survey. In this case, it was 562. Half of them are from decision makers from IT departments. Half of them are decision makers from lines of business departments. We have a vertical focus on manufacturing, since this is by far the largest vertical in the SAP market, but we have also a lot of companies coming from the public sector, from healthcare, from retail and wholesale, as well as from services, utilities, and transport. Regarding the regional split, we have a slight focus on our core markets in UK and France and Germany. From each of these countries, we have at least 100 participants, and from other regions highlighted at the top left, countries highlighted on the top left, we have at least a minimum 50 participants contributing to this survey. And since we are talking about SAP, and SAP is mainly a topic of large companies, it makes sense that we are focused on large enterprises and upper mid-sized companies, and we have excluded small companies with less than 1,000 employees. Next slide, please, Christian. So when talking about the results, or when talking about SAP S/4HANA and migration, the most important question, of course, is what is the status quo of the migration in European companies? And what we see here is just over 1/3 of the companies surveyed have already migrated their main systems, their essential systems, to S/4HANA. This is, at the first glance, might be a little bit surprising, since so many companies have already done their homework, have already done the migration. But given that the end of standard maintenance is just 4 ways away in 2027, and that large projects in enterprises can take several years to complete, and given that the number of SAP S/4HANA experts is limited, it absolutely makes sense that a lot of companies have already done their homework with the migration to S/4HANA. And honestly, when we talk to companies, a lot of companies have already migrated their core systems, but there's ongoing work around S/4HANA since they are involved in project to roll out further projects to other branch offices, to other countries, since they are involved in integration SAP solutions and non-SAP solutions. So even if they have already migrated the core, the essential system to S/4HANA, they still are involved in a lot of projects around S/4HANA. What is more worrying is the fact that about half of the participants in this survey currently do not have started any migration projects, since they are still in the planning phase, or they are still in the phase of discussing the migration to S/4HANA. This is a little bit worrying. These companies may run into a time problem, because the closer the deadline for the standard maintenance gets, the more difficult it may be to allocate the required needs, the required experts and the capacities. And I think these companies which are not have started any project should start a little bit worrying about their schedule. One last notion to this slide. Other ERP systems than SAP do not really play a role among this participants or further. We have already asked those companies who are currently running SAP systems. We have, as I mentioned before, 562 participants in total. Only I think 2 participants stated that they want to replace the current SAP installation with another solution. So all in all, even though companies now, please go back. Even though many companies are probably dissatisfied with SAP and are complaining about SAP since it's too complex, too expensive, too complex to integrate, they all want to stay with SAP. And that brings me to the next slide and the next question. Next slide, please. Which operating model do companies want to migrate to? And again, for me, a little bit surprising result, as nearly 1/3 of the companies are seriously interested in S/4HANA in the public cloud edition of SAP. Honestly, this is not the case often. This is not often the case when we talk to companies. Currently, a lot of companies are opting for private cloud or on-prem cloud, mainly private cloud. But there are some companies out there that are already using public cloud S/4HANA in public cloud edition, in a public cloud deployment mode. Even large enterprises, for example, from the service industry. And you should have in mind that we have asked companies that are planning and discussing to migrate to S/4HANA. So they are dealing with their deployment, or they consider their deployment model of the future. And again, this background, it makes sense that a lot of companies consider public cloud as a serious option for their deployment, for the operating mode. Because SAP, for example, is making currently great efforts to close the functional gap between the private S/4HANA private edition, which is currently advanced in terms of functionality, and SAP is trying to close this gap with the public cloud, of the public cloud edition, so that in the future there will be no reason for companies to opt for the private cloud edition. No functional reasons for companies to opt for the private cloud edition instead of the public cloud edition. And SAP itself has clearly stated and emphasized that the future of SAP S/4HANA lies in the public cloud edition, and that future functional enhancement will preferably be implemented in the public cloud edition. So for companies that want to have a long-term planning security, and they're currently considering which deployment mode they will install in the future, it makes absolutely sense to consider public cloud as a serious operation mode. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, that was a small overview over the first results of our current CXO survey. You can see some more topics we have covered in the survey. For example, we have a deep dive into the usage of BTP, how companies are integrating SAP solutions and non-SAP solutions, how they use BTP, the several components of BTP analysis and integration and development and so on. We have a broad part about the process modernization. Are companies using SAP S/4HANA as a starting point, as a trigger point for modernization of the process landscape, or do they opt only for a technical migration to S/4HANA? We have covered the migration approach. Do they opt from a brownfield versus or greenfield approach? A lot of companies are, for example, are following the blue field or the mixed approach in this case. And last but not least, we have asked the customers or the participants about their experience and satisfaction with their service partners and what they are expecting from the service provider when running SAP migration, SAP S/4HANA migration projects. And it's very interesting to see what they are demanding from the clients. For example, of course, high quality in consultants that are involved into the project, but also that they are demanding innovative ideas from service partners in terms of technical environment, architecture, SAP architecture, or IT architecture in general, where SAP S/4HANA has to be embedded into, and of course, process innovations. They're demanding process innovations as well. So all in all, we have almost 30 graphs with results in this CXO surveys. Each result can be analyzed by vertical, by company size, and by region. And yeah, if you're interested in detailed data, do not hesitate to contact me or our account management team. I think we have a lot of data and many interesting results that are worth a closer look. And with this, I would like to hand over back to, I think, Stefan.
Thank you, Joachim. Thank you, Spencer. Thank you, Christophe. So we open the stage now for questions. You see the little question bar, so I kindly ask you to put in your question right in there, because we are not opening the stage due to a large client list today. So if you have questions, quickly type them. I will receive them in real time, and then we can have some final questions to discuss in this round. And if not, you have always the access to have a discussion with us afterwards. So no hesitation here. We are happy to engage with you in any direction. I maybe have a question before we maybe receive some others. Christophe, could you give us a little first outlook on 24 compared on what you have seen in the 23 scenario that we are closing right now? So not in detail, but do you think that that the growth will be faster compared to 23, or on the same track, or even lower due to some circumstances, just as a ballpark?
We expect quite similar growth in 24 and in 23. So as of today, this is the scenario that we made. We expect similar growth in value, which means a bit more growth in volume. Why? Because this year the price effect will be again around 3 to 4%. And this has to do with all the inflation and the energy prices and salary increases that we have had in 22 and a bit less in 23. We see already, for example, due to lower recruiting and also lower attrition, that the salaries are less moving this year. So next year the price impact will be lower. As of today, we still hope that the situation, as overall economic situation, will be a bit better after the summer. So let's say September, October, when the budgets will be discussed, finalized for 24. This is the current scenario. It's a bit optimistic. We hope for this. If this happens, then we will have a slight improvement in growth again in 24, but as I mentioned, this will be more growth in volume, not more growth in value, just because of the price impact. There is a big risk, to be very frank, that the situation further deteriorates after the summer. The risk is there. Right now, based on the discussions that we have, we believe our optimism is reasonable, but the risk is there. It's also true that since, I would say, since the pandemic, we have seen a strong discrepancy, unalignment between the GDP growth and the IT spending. So when you think during the pandemic, the first 6 months were very difficult, but then in spite of a very tough situation, companies started to invest even more in IT to accelerate the digitization. So even if the situation deteriorates somehow in the second half of the year, we don't believe the market will dramatically decrease. Just think about all the topics I mentioned before. So companies may make some cost saving, yes, but all the topics we mentioned, all the growth drivers we mentioned, will certainly bring to the market to positive growth in 24, no matter the economic environment.
Great, thank you. And we have another question that is for Joachim on the S4HANA survey. So what is the difference for you between RISE Native SaaS Edition and S4HANA Native SaaS Edition? The same question for private.
Actually, RISE is a combination of several products within for companies that are about to migrate to S4HANA. RISE contains not only S4HANA, but it includes, for example, Signavio, it includes BTP and business networks and so on. Actually, it's a kind of contract compared to the SaaS native edition. But when talking to companies about RISE, the additional functionality coming from BTP, Signavio, and so does not really play a role. RISE for companies is mainly a question of deployment mode, and if they are sticking with the core, with SAP's strategy of keeping the core clean. So this is the main difference, I think, between the RISE private edition and cloud private edition. And there is no difference between, in my view, between public cloud edition and RISE public cloud edition. Only that the RISE public cloud edition contains some other stuff. And I think this is the main statement or message here, that from the client perspective, it's mainly about how to deal with the contract, who's the contract, who delivers operating services around the core.
Excellent, thank you, Joachim. And then I have a last question maybe for today. We will answer all the other questions on a one-on-one basis, don't worry. So one question to you, Spencer. One client is asking, could you give a ballpark on outlook on your 4X slide on which of those generative AI use cases will adopt the fastest? So do you have an idea if it's on the CX, AX, FX, or what was the fourth one? I have forgotten.
FX, so there's customer experience, employee experience, agent experience, and field experience.
Exactly.
So thank you for that question. Good question. So I would say probably at the moment, if you looked at Adobe's recent announcements, the way they're incorporating Gen AI into their creative suite of tools, I think you'll see a big through osmosis adoption into a lot of organizations in that marketing and creative space. I think where we will continue to see the biggest spikes will be where the suppliers, service providers, and more importantly the software firms, where they're adopting it into their current existing workflows the fastest. So Salesforce, ServiceNow, SAP, for example. All these organizations are putting it in. The other side of it is we're seeing a lot of contact center companies using it to help their agents as well as an initial sort of capability into there, pushing it out this year. Lots of early conversation. I think we'll probably see a lot of sort of spike in those particular spaces because they have the most immediate impact. It's also where they have the most amounts of data as well to support, because let's face it, ultimately Gen AI is only going to be as successful as the amount and quality, I should say, of data that it has access to. So and the other thing I would also caveat with that is that there's still a lot of questions around the what's the ethical structure around AI that an organization needs to have in place, irrespective of whether it's CX based or any part of their business. And also I've had a few conversations with a few organizations around the CX space that said they're slightly concerned with the potential for the sort of generative AI hallucinations that can happen, where the algorithms get very good at trying to interpret something into what it thinks is a sensible answer and might not actually quite yet fully be. So I think there's big use potential, like I say, in the creative side of things, so employee side. I think CX side of things through chatbots will be next, then AX will follow. I think field stuff and what I talked about to do with field will be one of the last ones, because organizations from an operating workflow perspective don't quite have that fully harmonized yet. So it's not that the technology won't be valuable, it's just those organizations have to go through a little bit of modernization around those processes to really get value out of that technology. I hope that helps.
Excellent. Thank you, Spencer. Thank you, guys and colleagues, and especially thank you, dear guests, for taking your time and for listening today. We will close the webinar right now, and we wish you a great summer, and stay tuned. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.